Promises. How many of you make promises? Thank you. I too made a promise. In May 2003, 15 years ago, I promised my chairman to set up a private university for JGI group at Raipur and left Bangalore. My task was to obtain an ordinance and start the university. I prepared myself, and on a summer morning, I stepped into the secretariat all suited up and found my way to the secretary's office. I was about to greet him warmly. He stopped me at the door and shouted at me. He said, "Get back. Get back and go get a superior of yours, for I don't deal with kids." And saying this, he slammed the door right on my face. I was shaken. I stood there motionless. And immediately I recalled my chairman. So I went to the public telephone booth and made a call to him. I narrated the entire incident and blamed the secretary. I even pleaded with my chairman and said, "Sir, I tried to seek an audience from him, but he is refusing me to give in. So what do I do now? I tried and I failed." My chairman heard me carefully and said, "Chandru, when it comes to promises, there's nothing to try. You either keep them or you break them." The next thing I heard was the disconnected phone line. I could sense a feeling of disappointment in his voice. As I dragged myself from that telephone to the bench outside the secretary's office, that disappointed voice took me back a decade. How many of you recognize this man? Well, it's a no-brainer, Sachin Tendulkar. As an 11-year-old, I was all excited and totally smitten by him. I dressed like him, I walked like him, I even grew my hair like him. On an otherwise insignificant morning, my cousin and I were preparing for the cricket match. My cousin had promised me that I would be opening the innings for my side, and I was all excited. The toss forced us to field first. And before we realized, we had conceded 164 runs out of 15 overs. Eager to win the match for my side, I padded up and I was raring to go. My cousin stopped me and said he had decided to replace me in batting. I resisted. He insisted. Disappointed, I sat down. I was waiting for my turn to bat. We won that match, but I never got to bat that day. Filled with anger and fury, I threw the cricket bat and smashed my cousin and started running back to my grandmother. And as I ran back and sought refuge in her, I told her about this betrayal. My grandmother reprimanded my cousin and sought an explanation from him. My cousin just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, the target changed. The situations and circumstances were out of control, so I could not keep up my promise." My grandmother sat both of us down and shared a story from a folklore of Karnataka. We know it as the story of Punniyakoti, the calf, and the tiger. It so goes like this, that Punniyakoti, the cow, lived with a few cows in the village. It used to go onto the hilltop for grazing. One day, the tiger attacks these cows and corners Punniyakoti. As the tiger was preparing to pounce on the cow, Punniyakoti stops the tiger and says, I promise I will come back to you after feeding my calf. Now let me go." Now the tiger laughs and says, "What kind of a cruel joke is this? Do you take me for a fool? Who lets go of their prey?" The tiger says, "Trust me, I have never broken my promise in my life, and I will come back." Touched by these words, the tiger finally allows Punniyakoti to go back to the calf and tells, "Come back to me as soon as possible." The tiger rushes back to the calf, feeds the calf, and tells the calf about the tiger. And then the cow says, I have to go. This is my final goodbye. I have promised and I will keep up my promise. The cow comes back to the tiger. The tiger is humiliated by the courage and morality of the cow. The tiger says, I would rather die of hunger than kill someone as good and truthful as you. Saying this, the tiger turns into the jungle. My grandmother held my cousin and me in her hands and said, when it comes to promises, there's nothing to try. You either keep them or you break them. That incident reminded me of my disappointment, and I was not in any position to disappoint my chairman. So I decided that I will work hard and get the ordinance. So I completed my paperwork and waited for that door to open. And as the door opened, Mr. Dan was furious to see me. He said, kid, don't you dare me. I had told you to leave this place in the morning. I stood up to him, gathered all the courage and said, sir, I have no superior here. All I have is myself to present my case. Mr. Dan looked into my paperwork. 45 days later, I had the signed copy of the paperwork and the ordinance in my hands and a beaming chairman by my side. Digging this deeper, friends, I came up to this understanding. Promises are broken when we say something and we don't do anything about it. When I was on the verge of breaking my promise, I discovered the gap between what is said and what is done. Digging a little more deeper, I found the right way to strengthen the core values and bridge that gap. And perhaps that is my idea of right way leader. To me, right way leadership is all about bridging the gap between what we say and what we do. And today, I am here to present to you that very idea. Now, to understand right way leadership, we need to look at it at two levels. First, the why. Why do this gap occur? Now, for that, let me ask you a few questions and do a simple thought experiment. How many of you here feel that jumping a red signal is wrong? Thank you. Now, honestly, tell me, how many of you have never, ever broken a red signal in your life? Thank you very much. That precisely explains the why, the gap. Renowned behavioral scientists Agiris and Sean, since 1964, have done extensive work on their theory on congruence and learning. In summary, they talk about two theories of action. One, espouse theory. When you are asked, you say the ideal way of doing things. And then the theory is in use. When you do your actual way of doing things. So the gap is not between theory and action. The gap is actually between two different theories of action. Now, friends, we all need to strengthen our core. But how do we do that? And that takes the next question. How do we bridge the gap? For understanding how, we need to look at an analogy. And my analogy today is from the same word, a bridge. Now, when you look at a bridge, what do we get when we see a typical bridge? We see 4 strong pillars. It is these pillars which hold the bridge together by providing a solid foundation. Those 4 pillars make way for a roadway, and that roadway ensures smooth passage. What I have done in right way leadership is I have replaced those 4 pillars with 4 values. 4 values, like 4 pillars, will strengthen us by giving us a solid foundation. My 4 values for the right way leader idea are courage, order, responsibility, and ethics. Thus, they put us on the right way. Now let's understand each of those values a little more deeper. Firstly, courage. Courage, for me and for all of us here, manifests by thoughts. Courage involves doing the right thing at the right time and also involves standing up for the right thing, irrespective of whether it is popular or not. For example, in my story, I stood up to the Education Secretary, S.K. Dan, and said, I have no one to present my case and all I have is myself. That's courage in action. Moving forward, order. Order is driven by motives. Order is making a method out of the entire madness. Order is formalizing the structures and processes. In the example and story of Punniyakoti, the cow prioritizes her calf's hunger over the tiger's hunger. That's order. The third one is responsibility, and all of us are no aliens to this. Responsibility is often demonstrated by actions. Responsibility is both towards self and towards others. And responsibility begins from conception and completes after completion. Responsibility in our thought experiment. All of us here said jumping a red signal is wrong, but few of us have done it. That's responsibility for us. Last and my favorite is ethics. Ethics originates from beliefs. Ethics is maximum good for maximum people for maximum period. Ethics employs a moral compass. Now, when my cousin betrayed me, that showed his moral compass. He might have blamed the circumstances, but his moral compass was in action. So friends, when we strengthen these core values, we find the right way to bridge the gap. When that door was shut on me at Raipur, I had to believe that I will keep up my promise. I had to be realistic about the challenges on hand. I had to imagine a positive outcome and dedicate myself completely towards achieving that by never losing focus on my goals. And last but not the least, enjoy this process, for there is no place worth going which has any shortcuts. So if you see this is the model to bridge the gap between what we say and what we do. So the next time you make a promise and you are trying to bridge the gap, remember this model and strengthen your core values so that you will be able to bridge it and emerge successful out of it. Thank you very much.